Welcome to Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire, a podcast brought to you by DMV Wrestling News at dmwrestlingnews.com. I'm your host, Jeff Quinton, and I'll be interviewing guests from the world of professional wrestling from the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. Thanks for joining us. Hi, I'm Jeff Quinton, your host, and I'm joined today by Boom Harden, who is not just a guest, he's one of our new co-hosts here on the podcast. How are you doing tonight, Boom?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
So we talked before about, in the last episode, remembering Brandon Holman, how you got into pro wrestling by showing up and helping out when you were younger and then eventually training to be a wrestler. And I wanted to talk now about what got you into watching pro wrestling as a kid and what shows you enjoyed watching and what wrestlers you enjoyed watching when you were younger.
My first really got watching wrestling on TV when I was a kid. My dad came home from work one night. I think he just asked me randomly, "Hey, want to watch wrestling?" I'm like, yeah, because like at this point, like my only access to wrestling was like through playing with friends' action figures and playing the SmackDown versus Raw video game. So I hadn't actually like really been engaged in watching wrestling on TV. So he turned on an episode of SmackDown, and I do recall it being the go home show right before the Royal Rumble in 2007. So I watched that episode. I remember the show ending with like a big preemptive battle royal where lights went out and they came back on. The Undertaker was in the ring. He just cleared house. So I think at that point, like I was pretty dead set on like having the Undertaker be my favorite wrestler. Ever since then, I've been a big Undertaker fan. And I think after the Undertaker, I think there were more wrestlers I ended up really being a major fan of. In particular, I remember being a huge fan of Jeff Hardy. Paul London and Brian Kendrick, I'd say, were like my first favorite tag team. And there's so many other guys that I can think of. I remember like just watching wrestling like that first like few months. I think definitely Undertaker, Jeff Hardy, and Paul London and Brian Kendrick being amongst my favorites.
After you decided to get into pro wrestling as a wrestler, who were some indie wrestlers at the time that you admired and that you really wanted to work with and enjoyed working with?
Definitely somebody that I admired and wanted to work with was Matt Tremont. Definitely Matt Tremont, just because like I remember first hearing about him online before I started training, and then meeting him at shows and just enjoying my conversations with him and just like seeing like how he was able to captivate a crowd with his entrance and his in-ring work. So definitely I gravitate towards Matt Tremont in particular. I think also guys like Sami Zayn back when he was El Generico really inspired me. I also think guys like Ricochet and like the stuff he did over in Japan and PWG like really captivated me. The Young Bucks, I could talk all day about how important they were to like just expanding my horizons, like what wrestling I could watch and like be a part of. I can't really say that I've worked with officially with too many people that I came up watching. I'm really trying to think. I did benefit from wrestling Lince Dorado a few different times, and besides that, I can't really think of anybody that worked that I've had the opportunity to wrestle. But I do hope for such opportunities in the future.
Talk about some of the people who you have worked with and who you liked working with the most.
I really enjoy working with Eric Corvus. Eric Corvus, long time veteran wrestler of the independent scene. He's been wrestling for like 20 plus years. Basically, I think basically as long as I've been alive, to be completely honest, he's been wrestling. I enjoy wrestling him very much. I enjoy wrestling Samuel Fozzy. He's a wrestler out of the South Jersey area. Really enjoy wrestling him. Oh man. There's so many guys that aren't even coming to mind that I enjoy wrestling. It's a very difficult question to answer outright.
Who are your dream matches that you haven't had that you still would like to have?
Definitely, I would love a match with Rich Swann. Rich Swann is definitely somebody that I've always looked up to, and he's a great locker room presence, incredibly funny, entertaining guy, and one of my favorite people on this planet. So definitely, I would love to wrestle Rich Swann.
Yeah, one of the best matches I've seen in person was Rich Swann at CZW against Leo Rush.
Oh snap! Leo's definitely somebody that I also like came up like admiring, just because like I remember like I went to one of his first matches on Dojo Wars over in Jersey, and just like being captivated by him and just like seeing like his speed and like his like slickness, and then seeing his rise up to the company and like the stuff he did other places. So Leo Rush is also somebody that like I have a lot of respect for.
Matt Tremont is somebody I've heard a lot of good things about through a friend of mine, JB Anderson, who was on the previous episode talking about Brandon Holman. So he has been up there wrestling for H2O for the past couple of years and really enjoys it and is doing what he loves by wrestling up there with the deathmatch scene.
I've always been in the deathmatch scene, oddly enough. Like starting in CZW, it's kind of like just like a a general thing, but then like I remember like just being on crew for several of the first few H2O shows and just like loving like how much creativity went into like doing deathmatch wrestling. I've loved helping Shawnee and Tony. There's some very unsung guys in the history of CZW where they created. Shawnee and Tommy. My bad, Tommy. Just creating like so many of the contraptions and devices that you see in deathmatch wrestling. Like they built the Cage of Death. They had us build a Cage of Death every year. Getting really creative with glass and light tubes and different kinds of things that you could build. So like deathmatch wrestling is awesome just because like the amount of creativity that happens with it.
Is there a match that you've wrestled that you are always going to remember as being one that was really notable, or one that was really remarkable, or one that was really great that you felt really good after you finished the match? And who was it with?
Would have to say, oh man, this was like this one random match. It was like from 2019, and I remember it because the footage is lost forever, so nobody can ever see it, and that still just sucks. It was a match that I had at Pro Wrestling Magic back in 2019 against Steve Pena. It was like one of the first few matches that I had as myself where I had full creative freedom and I was able to operate and I felt good. I do remember feeling like there's a lot that I had to learn and still work on, but in terms of like everything that I set out to do in that particular match, I remember like just executing, but I don't have any way to prove it. So it remains now just like a memory, and it is a memory that I hold fondly.
What is your most embarrassing moment in pro wrestling?
Oh man. Oh, that's easy answer. So before I actually started as a wrestler, I was a referee, and my very first night refereeing, right before about to go out, I squat down. I think I dropped something. I'm gonna go squat down, and my pants ripped. So I had to referee for the rest of the night wearing ripped pants, and that was incredibly mortifying. But I do have to say that I am much more resilient and humble for that experience.
When I was doing the podcast before, I think I've heard ripped pants from someone else before. I don't remember who it was right now.
It was nice to know I'm not alone in that embarrassment.
What is the hardest bump you remember ever taking?
Last year at CZW, it was a four-way match. It was myself against Dave McCall and Mike Walker and Brandon from Milk Chocolate. I took a blockbuster off of Dave McCall's shoulders from Mike, and I remember landing right on the back of my head. I don't know how I wasn't concussed after that, but that hurt and it sucked, and I don't want to do it again.
What angles and wrestlers have you been following in the major companies right now?
I've definitely been following the angle between Dominic Mysterio, Liv Morgan, and Rhea Ripley, and the stuff with the Judgment Day, just because it's very soap opera, and even though like I do consider myself more of an in-ring appreciator, I do love like good, easy to follow angles that you can relate to like something that you'd see on like a soap opera, honestly, like on like a good drama show, just like, oh man, she used to be with him, but now she's with him, or he used to be with her, but now he's with her, like just like little like schlocky guilty pleasure stuff like that, and it's just good fun to like observe that kind of thing.
And it's been pretty amazing how things have evolved, and that whole angle of how we've got Rhea and Damian Priest as baby faces now, and Dominic has made himself even more of a heel than he was before.
Oh yeah, well, to be completely honest, and as far as like my observation, it made sense because both Rhea and Damian were getting favorable reactions from the crowds regardless, but I think that like what's happened is just like a definitive like, okay, now like you really can cheer for them.
And I think it's another good angle in the WWE for people to follow who aren't following the Bloodline angle as much as before. And the Bloodline angle is kind of different than it was before now. And to me, it's not hitting as hard as it was before, even though it is starting to hit now that Roman Reigns came back. It's kind of in a lull and starting to build back up now, while the Judgment Day angle is firing on all cylinders right now and taking up some of the slack from Bloodline. I mean, if you can watch both shows every week, and I know it's still hard to watch 3 hours of Raw for me at times, and I just really wish they would go back to 2 hours when they go to Netflix. I'm hoping we'll see what happens on that.
We will see what happens.
Do you watch AEW much?
Not too much, but I do pay attention to it. Like if it's like on, like let's say I'll be at a friend's house and I notice that about that time of night on like a Friday night I'm not booked to wrestle. I'll ask to like turn on either Rampage or Collision or something like that and just I'll watch it. And I do like as far as like the wrestling that I see. Um and I do have to say that I do love Tony Storm's current gimmick and what she's doing just because it's very unique. It's very unique, like how they're doing it, but it is familiar. It's akin to Goldust, and I was always a pretty avid Goldust admirer, just because of like how captivating and entertaining it is. You know?
And I like the going to black and white part of it, and the old school looking sets and costumes. And I even saw where she was at a convention and was signing autographs for somebody, and the person had photoshopped a picture of her and Babe Ruth together, black and white picture, and had her sign it. And I'm kind of following the Bryan Danielson retirement angle now. That's one I'm following a little bit.
That's awesome.
I really hate I missed the Thunder Rosa Deonna Purrazzo Texas bull rope match last week because I was actually at the Brandon Holman Memorial show. So I got to get back and watch that at some point if I can find it. I really have started watching the NWA again more. Did this on CW. I watched it before COVID. Kind of stopped watching it during COVID because it kind of died out. Thinking about trying to go to their show in Philly later this month at 2300 Arena, especially now that I actually know some people who are wrestling there and know some people that are wrestling on that show. I know Spencer Slade has been on this podcast before, and he signed a TV deal with them recently. And I met Natalia Markova and Brian Idol at an event before WrestleMania up in New Jersey at Atlantic All-Star Wrestling and 1CW and Three Legacies up in Woodbury, and that was a good show. And just when you know people, you want to go see them more than you would if you didn't as a fan for me. So
Oh yeah, and I do have to commend publicly on the podcast how happy and excited I am for my boys, the Slime Balls. They earned it. They did it the right way. I'm happy for their success. My man, Sean Carlson, he wears a cowboy hat, big hoss of a man. Very happy for him. And my girl, Adriana. Very happy for her as well. I knew her from her early days in the industry. I'm very happy that she's come a long way as well. So I wish it were me, but I'm happy it's them, if that makes any sense. I try not to let any like jealousy I may have rain on my parade of my compatriots because they earned their spots. They did it the right way. And I implore people to like go out if you have the opportunity to go out and support the NWA and support these great wrestlers.
no, I'm familiar with all of them. I've met them and seen them wrestle. I mean, Sean Carlson has wrestled a few places that I've been the last 2 months, and saw Adriana wrestle up at that show in Woodbury as well. And I saw the Slime Balls wrestle at CZW a few times, and I think I might have seen them at MCW. I'm not sure. I know I saw Milk Chocolate at MCW last week. Actually, we're going against the Hype for their belts. It's the Hype's first title defense, which they won. So could you talk about the indie wrestling scene in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, but especially New Jersey since that's where you're from, and how big it is there? I mean, when I do the weekly previews every week, I mean, New Jersey and Pennsylvania consistently have the most shows every single week almost.
Yeah, wrestling is a very active in Jersey and PA. In Jersey, mostly because the athletic commission is much more lax comparative to Pennsylvania. So you have shows like I'd say like probably like maybe like 2 to 3 shows happening in state at least every weekend. It does get like a little crowded and conflictive in terms of like what shows you're able to work because like booking conflicts with the dates and whatnot. But overall, I do have to say that it's a good culture. It's nice seeing familiar faces every weekend. But then also, I do love the challenge of going to a new place in like the Jersey and PA area and meeting new people there and getting to work in front of new audiences there. Very good. I do feel like even though there is a lot going on, it is growing. I must say that it is growing, but I hope that it grows in a positive direction where everybody can benefit. I must be honest, there are like always like little dumb business conflicts that I try to stay uninvolved with as much as possible. But to be honest, there are some certain conflicts. But as long as like we all do good business and deliver on good wrestling and give the fans what they want, everything will be just fine.
Yeah, that's been my attitude about running my website and newsletter and even the podcast is I want to promote places for wrestlers to work and for shows for people to work at, even if I personally don't like something about the company, unless there's something really egregious going on. But I generally try to promote everybody so that I can help everybody have a place to work. And if you'll see, I focus my promoting shows on the matches and make sure I get a match card, which some companies are a little better than others at doing that ahead of shows. The harder thing to crack is to get results from people, from what I'm noticing lately. So that's a project I'm working on, is to get more results from people so that helps build storylines for people who can't get to every show. And for some places, I've been to shows where part of the angles are done online and the people in the actual shows aren't online for it. And I'm sitting there explaining to other fans at the show why something's happening or what's going on because they totally missed the online element of it. So I want to try to get into providing some online tips for different companies now too, some free tips for people for social media and for online marketing for their shows and for their companies. And I'm going to possibly get into offering some consultations for people on it as well in the future if I'm able to.
That'd be awesome. That sounds dope, man.
Because I have a background in digital marketing and social media and writing and public relations, so I think I could help with that. That was actually why I started the website in the first place, is I was trying to crack into a company to work for, and it was a company that was well established and really big and had their own way of doing things, so there was no way I was going to get in. And I've tried another couple of companies. The problem is that when you don't have the reputation built up yet, which I'm working on building now, and the money situation at a lot of companies is so tight that you've got to get the right match and the right connection, because not everybody can afford it and not everybody needs it. I was having this discussion before about Facebook versus Twitter versus Instagram versus online ticketing versus tickets at the door kind of thing with somebody, and how some of the rural companies don't need as much as some of the more urban companies do. So it's give and take. I know, for instance, lately I've been promoting shows that I write about on some of the Philly subreddits on Reddit and getting a lot of reaction to it, especially for like I'm going to get the name wrong. The show that's at the Attic Brewing this weekend.
Yes, Labor of Love.
Labor of Love, yeah, their show this weekend. I know I got a lot of reaction to it on Reddit, and I know I got the beginning of the Love Park shows for CZW. I was getting a lot of reaction to them, and people saying it was cool walking by and seeing wrestling in the park going on, and they were happy to hear about the next occurrence of it. And then there's that show Friday night at the High Tension, and the show that's at the Museum of Contemporary Art Friday night at Philomoka.
Yeah, High Tension Wrestling and PWE, Pro Wrestling Explosion. I think they're doing a joint show.
Yeah, they're doing a joint show. And then there was a show recently on a Friday night that got a lot of attention when I posted it online. And I've played around with that. I played around with the MACW show, posting my story about it on the Northern Virginia subreddit the other day, and it got a lot of attention because they did a free show at a fair in Manassas. So just trying to change the way things get promoted, if possible, to try to see what works and what doesn't work, because you have to be inventive and creative. I know I did something at one employer ahead of the Super Bowl when there was going to be a Super Bowl ad on a subject that was related to the nonprofit I worked at, and we ended up doing a joint one with another publication in our space and ended up getting 750,000 likes on the Facebook page and got coverage in the New York Times and at Mashable. So that's the kind of thing that you can hit once, or you can keep trying to hit it again, but you just have to be creative in how you do things and do partnerships. I mean, I'm trying to do partnerships with some of the wrestling collectible memorabilia companies as well as some of the wrestling promotions. So that's the kind of thing you have to look into to promote it. And I know as a wrestler, you know that you've got to promote yourself and promote the shows you're going to be on to try to get more shows and more bookings and to try to get more attention and be able to turn people out to those shows. If you could talk about that, what you've done for that and what you think of that, I'd appreciate it too.
Yeah, I definitely do appreciate that. And I do have to commend certain companies that go about trying to like focus on like both sides of promoting in terms of like traditional putting up posters, selling tickets, kind of promoting, as well as trying to have a dominant online presence. It's a balancing act for real.
I know this is something we talked about online a little bit before. Could you talk about Kevin Sullivan now?
Yeah. So unfortunately, recently Kevin Sullivan has passed away, and I was privileged to being around him very early in my career. With helping at H2O, I was able to work with Kevin Sullivan a few different times, just like doing security and like just getting to talk to him about wrestling, and also attending a joint seminar that he and Shane Douglas had, and just understanding like his view of the business. He talked about him being much smaller, but still having to think of psychology about how to go about wrestling Andre the Giant, or just how deep he would have to go into kayfabe, and just like understanding the work of wrestling and knowing that selling it as much as possible like really did help bring in the crowd. Where you have people who doubt the legitimacy of the sport all the time, but if you sell it and sell it in publicly, you can make anybody believe anything. And yeah, that's really what I remember learning from Kevin Sullivan.
People have to hang out together to make things believable, and that's why the whole thing used to be that the baby faces and the heels wouldn't hang out together, they'd hang out with each other. But then there was the time before WrestleMania when, was it Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Duggan got caught with weed together in the car, and that was breaking kayfabe for some people. I know there was a situation in the past where there was the Ric Flair plane crash where there was a baby face on that plane who didn't go to the hospital and dealt with his injuries on his own for a couple of weeks and didn't wrestle. And that's just extreme some people go to. And the thing I remember about Kevin Sullivan is that the rumors always got started when he was back in the territory days, and it continued when he was in WCW, that he was really a devil worshiper. I mean, he sold that so much that people were believing it, and that just was the one thing that made him the ultimate heel.
Kevin Sullivan was awesome to talk to and awesome to watch. I remember watching a couple of things from him and from Florida, from Championship Wrestling from Florida, and just trying to watch it through the lens of somebody in modern day and watching it through the lens of somebody who was around back then. It's crazy. It still holds up, and it's still meant to be studied as like a go-to template for like a dark X character, somebody of the supernatural, and just like I can't speak my praise about Kevin Sullivan enough.
And when it came to booking, he could make chicken salad out of chicken shit. I mean, if he had very little to work with, he could turn it into something, from what I've always heard and read about. And then there was a story I hadn't heard before that Eric Bischoff told last week on Busted Open, the day that it came out that Kevin Sullivan had died. And it was Bischoff talking about how the only person he trusted to tell that Hogan was the third man was Kevin Sullivan, and that he had Hogan hole up at Kevin Sullivan's beach house in Daytona before the event when it happened, because he didn't trust Hogan being around his agents. He didn't trust him being around his wife at the time, and how they would talk him into or out of things based on a whim. And just to protect it, he had him stay at Kevin Sullivan's house for a few days, and even at that point had the backup plan of Sting if Hogan backed out on it.
Oh yeah, it's there. There's so many different tales that you can tell about Kevin Sullivan over the history and over the years.
Could you talk about what you've done when you've traveled overseas and wrestled, and any future plans you have to wrestle overseas?
My time in Europe, it was very trying time because there was things going on, family that I was worried about while I was over there. But it was a valuable experience. Just getting to go to a new place, meet new people that have experiences that were vastly different, but yet still similar to mine. It was very difficult to communicate with people because we spent the group that I went with, we spent the majority of our time in Gelsenkirchen, Germany. And Gelsenkirchen is a place in Germany that's quite rural. So hardly anybody spoke English. We made fast friends with a dude who worked in the local grocery store who did speak English. It was very hard to get around that way. But I remember just like spending the vast majority of my day training at the WXW school. We had very good trainers in the rotation. The rotation is a great guy, as well as Robert Dreisker, and then later Peter Tahanye. And seeing what was the same as far as German and American wrestling, and seeing what was different as far as German and American wrestling, and seeing it was very good and eye opening, inspiring to meet people that had very, very similar goals to mine, but still grew up on the completely different side of the world. And just like and just understanding that like we all shared the same dream, and that was really beautiful. Like understanding that my dream is shared with these people, and every day we got to work at it, and we also had like great downtime with I remember almost every night it was either if there wasn't any food back at the Airbnb that we're staying at, we either go to McDonald's, which if in case anybody hasn't been, German McDonald's or European McDonald's is the best McDonald's out there for you. And either that or going to like this local spot by the train station that sold what was called French tacos. It was essentially a quesadilla that had potatoes and like the sauce. Some guys I went on the trip with did not like the sauce. I love that sauce. And I remember devouring that and drinking so many Fanta Exotic sodas. Oh man, I wish Fanta Exotic was in the States. So many Fanta Exotic sodas. I do believe that is the vast majority of what my experience was like wrestling overseas.
And I remember I wrote a profile on my site recently about you looking to go overseas again. Could you talk about that?
Absolutely. So, I do have a leave of absence off from work. My primary job has given its employees the first few weeks of January off. So I'm looking to go on another excursion if the opportunity is available during that time period, just so I can make the most of the time that I have to focus on wrestling. I am interested in going back to Europe as well. I am interested in possibly going to Japan, Mexico, or Chile, or Canada, perhaps. Just another country, just so I can hone my craft so much more and raise my profile as somebody who is a force to be reckoned with in the industry.
That sounds good, and I've heard some good things about McDonald's and the food in Japan as well, so that could be interesting. I know the only overseas McDonald's I've had was Moscow, which that was 30 years ago, and that was kind of interesting as well.
It's the meat, just like I love like their McDonald's so much.
Could you talk about any shows that you have coming up that you're booked on?
This upcoming weekend on August 17th, I'm wrestling at DCW. The following Sunday, I'm wrestling at Pro Wrestling R over in New Jersey. DCW is in Delaware. Pro Wrestling R is in Gloucester, New Jersey. And then the following week, I am making my Connecticut debut with Valentina Vasquez, and we are the team known as Dragonheart. We're wrestling for Kaiju Pro Wrestling. That is taking place in Connecticut. And the week after that, I am returning to We Are One Wrestling. That's going to be coming live from the Monster Factory in Paulsboro, New Jersey. That's happening on August 31st. Those are the shows for August. That is Pro Wrestling are this upcoming Sunday. The Saturday right before, we have DCW. And then the week after that, making my Connecticut debut in Kaiju Pro Wrestling. And the week after that, on August 31st, you will catch me at We Are One Wrestling.
I went to this DCW event this weekend. I went to last year's at Marydale, the Sweet Summer Night one, and that's a really nice facility. I mean, it's just in the fire hall where the trucks are, where the ring is set up, but the actual facility itself for the banquet hall is really nice. The food is really great. Got a nice bar. I'd encourage anybody to go to that if you're anywhere near Marydale, Delaware. I know it's a real small town right on the Maryland-Delaware line, and I really like the rural nature of it because I grew up in a small town in the country in South Carolina, so it reminded me of that, and it was just a great time. So I'd encourage people to come see you wrestle there this weekend, or the other show this weekend that you're wrestling in New Jersey. And if you could also tell us all your social media platforms that you can be found on.
You can find me at Boom Harden on Facebook. You can find me as Boom Harden on Instagram. You can find me as Boom Harden on Twitter. And you can please follow the Boom Harden YouTube channel.
And I want to thank you for talking to me tonight and welcome you again as one of our new co-hosts for the podcast.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good night. Thank you all.
Thanks again for joining us on Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire. Please join us for our next great episode wherever you get your podcasts. Now for our credits. Host is Jeff Quinton. That's me. Production assistant is Josie Quinton. Producer is Scott English. If you'll please check out dmvwrestlingnews.com every day to get the latest pro wrestling news from the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond, we'd appreciate it. Thanks again.